Once, upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door.
In 1841, the book Murder in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe was published in Graham's Magazine in Pennsylvania. This book is widely considered the first detective novel, and it is known for making the mystery genre and paving the way for the genre as a whole. The book details and describes the story of a young detective as he attempts to solve the murder of a mother and her daughter. When it comes to the discussion of this frontier, there are a few things that need to be considered. Edgar Allan Poe's unique writing style. This is one of the first discussion points. Edgar's writing style was unique. The graphic imagery, diction, and ongoing themes made his writing style different and made it difficult for many writers to replicate. The book also introduced many tropes, character-wise, that would be used in detective stories later. The second bulletin point is the time in which the novel was written and published. Many of the novels at the time did not portray many mystery novels. Many were either horror, romance, or realistic fiction. And while some could argue that the mystery genre does share many similar aspects to horror, it is still a completely different genre that has contrasting points and themes. This factor gave a tremendous boost in popularity to the book because of how different it was. And lastly is the intriguing plot. The book set up an intriguing thread that readers would not have expected. Now, with the consideration of these three factors, we can begin to understand the how and the why of this book and its popularity. We can explore how the product of a man became the torch for a genre and the generations of mystery enjoyers. We begin in Boston on January 19, 1809. The young poet was born on a fine day surrounded by his parents. His mother and father were professional actors and unfortunately passed before the poet turned 3. Due to this tragedy, he was raised in the home of John Allen, a successful tobacco merchant, and his wife, Frances Valentine. Poe was given a good education and had a good surrounding. He studied in England for 5 years at the age of 6 and grew not only his math and history education but also his language skills. In 1825, he was accepted into the University of Virginia, but was forced to leave due to a lack of financial support and his large amount of gambling debts that John refused to pay off. By 1827, Poe had no money or job, and his relationship with John was practically non-existent. The merchant had cut Poe off, so Poe had nowhere to turn to, so he joined the military. He also managed to publish his first poems during this time. His first series was called Tamerlane and Other Poems. It was published the same year that he joined the military. The book wasn't that popular since that was Poe's first book ever published, and it got a tad bit of recognition. In 1829, Araf, Tamerlane, and Minor Poems were published, and as its predecessor, it did not gain much recognition. Poe attended West Point after his time in the Army, but like his time in college, he had to leave due to a lack of financial support. He moved to Baltimore with his aunt Marie Clem and her daughter Virginia. His writing career became the main focus, and he began writing many poems and novels. One of these poems included The Raven, which had instant success as soon as it was published in 1845. In 1836, he married his young cousin Virginia Clem, who was 13 and died of tuberculosis in 1847. His job caused him to move around quite a bit, and he was working on publishing a book called The Pen, which was later named The Stylus. Then, on October 7, 1849, in Baltimore, Edgar Allan Poe died. The mystery surrounding his death is great. No one truly knows how he died. Edgar Allan Poe's writing style stood out amongst other authors, and his interesting choices of theme is shown well within his work. Edgar's writing style had very graphic imagery, graphic enough to send a shiver down one's spine. His diction is precise, and he consistently selects words that are appropriate for the scene that they are put in. And the ongoing themes in his books were something of extraordinary. They mainly consist of horror, death, love, and grief, and the way that he is able to successfully execute these themes are amazing. His works, such as Annabel Lee and The Raven, are excellent examples. They display themes of love and sadness that can be found in his other fantastic works, including this novel. The book also managed to introduce many tropes that would be used later by many different writers. The smug detective, the first-person narrator, those are themes that would be used in the book Sherlock Holmes. The author of Sherlock Holmes took inspiration from Poe's book to write his own. It's strange to think that this book inspired one of the most well-known detectives, but it is true. In the first Sherlock Holmes book, The Study in Scarlet, Watson even compares Sherlock to the main character in Poe's novel, see Auguste Dupin. This is a direct admittance that Sherlock was inspired by Poe. This way of writing, the themes, the imagery, the word choice, it's all unique and special to Poe. It's his style of writing, and it's part of the reason why this book was able to become a frontier, and why it inspired other writers. The era in which the book was published aided in how and why this book became such a frontier. There were hardly any mystery books at the time. Examples of the books that were published at the time were Pride and Prejudice, Little Woman, Dracula, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, none of which are mystery. Edgar Allan Poe's new genre was something exciting for people to experience. It was a genre that observed and broke down how murders and crimes were solved. It was a genre where the readers really had to think and where readers could solve the crimes along with the main character. The Murders in the Rue Morgue was, and still is, a very well-crafted novel that has a very interesting choice in plot. The book's plot revolves around the murder of two women that is solved by a young man in Paris, see Auguste Dupin, and the narrator who is the unnamed sidekick of Dupin. The book focuses more on the analysis and the mental side of solving the crime. It described his process, thoughts, and observations which intrigued the readers and let them figure out the offense with our main character, Auguste Dupin. The book's plot was different because it was so complicated. It served a very surprising twist in which the murderer wasn't human. The murderer was in fact an orangutan that a sailor captured. The orangutan fled to the Rue Morgue in a fit of rage. He then went into a rampage after the woman screamed in fear, and it killed the mother and her daughter. The main character of Edgar Allan Poe's novel is interesting because he is not exactly a detective, and is only researching the case for curiosity's sake. He didn't accept this sailor's offer of an award, but was only interested in the case and the murder of the two women, and he wasn't involved in any law enforcement. He was neither a detective nor a police officer. The plot is well made and is so fascinating. Without the plot, this book would have most likely been nothing, and the mystery genre would most likely have ceased. The novel's plot had a big impact on the popularity of the book, and had a big role on how the book became a frontier. In 1841, the book Murder in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe was published in Graham's Magazine in Pennsylvania. This book paved the way for a new frontier because of Edgar Allan Poe's unique writing style, the time in which the novel was written and published, and finally, the intriguing plot. Creating a novel is already a tantalizing task, but creating a whole new genre from it is absolutely incredible. It is a feat that not many have accomplished. This novel would inspire many writers for generations to come, and it has proudly cemented its way in history as the first book of the fantastic murder mystery genre.
Distinctly I remember. It was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name